Lynn Johnson asked Miriam to sort of talk about the ceasefire model. You know, it's a direct intervention program that we have here in Chicago. And she asked Miriam to pretend that she doesn't know that ceasefire just got a $1 million contract with the cops.
Yes, I'm trying to pretend very, very much on that point. Yes, absolutely. So, you know, I think oh Lord. This is so not good. So I'm in a really difficult position, right? Because one of the parts of ceasefire that is very laudable is their reliance on people who have lived experience to be back out into their communities and to acknowledge they have something very powerful and important to share. They also employ many, many people who are returning citizens, people who are coming back from prison. And many of them are people I know and really appreciate and love and care about. And they get an opportunity through this contract to be able to live and feed themselves and feed their families. So I want to say that on that level, they are doing something that I think is important to help sustain people, unfortunately, in a Band-Aid way, while they're trying to make themselves, you know, remake themselves back in our community. So I want to say that. I also want to say that I like the idea of being in your community and speaking to people and actually having an opportunity to talk things through and knowing who's who and being able to have that kind of community model. So I think that's really important as well. The places where I think it's very problematic is the limited definition of violence that is being looked at and seen and addressed, right? It's shootings, right? Stop the shootings. What they have learned over time is that many of those shootings are actually domestic violence and sexual assault related. They're coming from that place, right? So they finally actually been able to identify that after 10 years of existence, which is helpful. I think that we're not going to solve the problem of violence in communities through that model alone, obviously. I'm trying so hard because I think that I don't want to be one of those people that critiques people's attempts and then offers nothing in its stead. But I think that the notion of public violence being the violence that we put all our resources to is really problematic. I think that ignoring what people see as private forms of violence is problematic. I think that not even addressing state-based violence is super problematic. I think that the people who are in charge of that organization not being like the people in their neighborhoods is problematic. I think that talking about violence as a disease, I'm gonna leave it there. So I think that it's difficult, and I think there are good parts and there are parts that leave something to be desired, as with everything. I worry that we're putting all our eggs in one basket in the city also, as like this is how we're gonna solve violence, and when it doesn't end violence, then it's gonna be seen as a failure that's gonna impact many other organizations and groups that are saying that they're doing anti-violence work as well. So I worry about that big time, and I worried about that from the very beginning with the film, which I saw in a rough cut years ago, and then gave my 2 cents about that and was not invited back. But you know, but I think that those are some of my concerns. So a mixed bag. I don't know how other people maybe want to put themselves out there too. So, Erica. No.
Erica already did it. I already did it. Sorry, it was you.
I will just underscore that in a nation that has no commitment to allowing people who are exiting prisons and jails the opportunity to rebuild their life, I think that it's an employer of people more than a living wage and values the expertise and the life skills that they've gained. So I think that I was so appreciative that you started with that, and I think that that's key.
Thank you. I'm the daughter of a diplomat.
Beth Richie said something that was really interesting to me, Andrea Richie, about police deciding who gets to be a victim and who does not. And I was wondering if you all could explore how that comes into play as it relates to violence that occurs within the prison and sexual violence that occurs within the prison, because I think that that's an area where a lot of legislation and public response is lacking. Like the public doesn't talk about it, they don't think about it, maybe because they aren't.
You are told you enjoyed it,
That's, it's being in prison for a gay man is like being in Disneyland. In fact, prosecutors make that as an argument to put people to death because sending a gay man to prison is too much fun, so we should put them to death. That's the way that victimhood gets policed in prison. What I find, and then also people, there's a complicated thing around like trying to trade sex for your needs in prison, and then who's a victim and who's not in that situation, how that gets policed, and I think that's also frightening. And then I think the fact that trans and gender nonconforming folks, not just trans women, but also gender nonconforming women or people in women's prisons, the way in which they're subjected to sexual assault by guards, but also sexual assault against them is used as a way of policing everyone's gender inside prison is just, it's horrific. But I also I think that to the extent that we're looking at state sexual assault, we do focus on it in prison. Of course we should. I just want us to also think about it outside, and then also think about the ways in which it's used to police all of us outside.
Sorry. You're going to answer. And
Oh,
also I want Jane to talk about it.
I was just going to mention really quickly that we're going to be starting to do 24-hour crisis response to Cermak Hospital, which serves the folks who out of Cook County Jail. And we're doing so under the aegis of the Prison Rape Elimination Act, PREA. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out. And I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but I think we'll be getting a different kind of information, and it'll be interesting to see kind of what kind of advocacy then we are doing in those crisis moments.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I had a summer internship working on the prison rape elimination standards, working for a policy institute in DC. It was like my first ever experience doing that, and it was like enough. 3 months was enough for me. I realized that was not my path in life. And what troubled me really about that experience was, again, that like the institutionalization of some of these ideas, this movement into policy, and just for me really raised a lot of questions about how an institution that's already so oppressive, where there's already so much violence, how that institution would ever be able to prevent violence from happening. And thinking about how much work and effort advocates, both anti-violence advocates, prison reform advocates, were putting into fighting for PREA to get the Prison Rape Elimination Act to get passed, and then to get these standards out there, to get them written, to all this fighting back and forth about what these standards were going to look like. All that effort for something that prisons will be responsible for implementing. It's just like so much of our energy is put into that legislative fight, and without really a lot of foresight about how it's actually going to look, who's going to enforce it, where the accountability is, and without really thinking through who the people are that are most affected by violence in prison, and why those people are there. Why are there so many trans women locked up in men's facilities who are being sexually assaulted? Without asking those questions. So. I think that it's a big issue, and that unfortunately it's not an issue that those of us on the outside really can respond to a lot. We can't provide support to people in prison. We don't have that same kind of access, so it's definitely a complicated thing, and we need to think a lot more about that.
I just wanted to add that a lot of the public discourse around the Prison Rape Elimination Act that motivated it getting passed was violence that happened, or it was the mythology that the violence that happens in prisons that house people that count as men is sexual violence between men. And so it really erased what happens in prisons that house people that qualify as women, and it also really erased that a lot of the violence is perpetrated by officers, guards. So I think that was really the push for the passage of the Prison Rape Elimination Act was those dangerous men that are sexually assaulting each other. And I think that was the narrative that was needed to galvanize the passage, but I think that has had ricocheting implications.